Welcome to Top of the Line. This is the podcast version of our YouTube show. New episodes every Monday and Friday where we talk about audio and hi-fi related themes.
If you have any requests for a future episode, send us an email, totl@abyssheadphones.com. I noticed some people we have that some new customers that we have that are talking about hearing differences between things. And I noticed that a lot on a talk on various online areas, forums, things like that, where people are like chatting and going. I think a lot of people, they don't get involved with talking because they're afraid, they don't know how to communicate what they're hearing. And that's part verbiage, which takes time to learn. I mean, and the other part is, they might not be sure of themselves because they've never compared notes with anyone else. Took us time to learn.
That's right. I remember the early days.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know these headphone terms because they are different than like
speakers. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
There does seem to be a common collection of terms that people use to describe things, and I didn't understand them at all at first, but they're pretty much just arbitrary, but they're geared towards conveying a particular feeling or sense of the music, more or less, right? So it's
a whole bunch of adjectives is what it is.
Well, it's a very difficult thing to describe.
It's a different language because you got to understand what it means. What does smooth mean?
Without ever hearing it, it's hard to...
Decay. What is that? Is that like
describing an emotion?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I'm just mad.
Well, actually, that's true. It gets actually the bigger the difference in what you hear, the more difficult it is to describe because it requires more adjectives.
Right.
It's not like you could say it in one word, because the one word doesn't really cover it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to come up with the levels too, because how do you really compare two different things or even three things? If one's a little bit better than the other, how do you really explain that? And then how do you come up with like an absolute scale that works into the future?
Yeah, so I think the best thing what I come up with is let's just talk about some of our earlier experiences with listening to things. And then, like I know, like in this case of verbiage, like I could go back to the mid '80s when I worked for Bowers and Wilkins. I wasn't in the audio scene. I mean, I had a stereo, big deal, but I wasn't in the audio scene. And I started reading Stereophile at the time and the reviews, and I learned the verbiage from reading reviews, I think, was what I recall. And it took probably a good year or two, to really be fluent with the way we're talking. So that to me, that's one way to learn this stuff is read.
That's a long way.
Read, yeah.
But I think, just actually hearing different things is...
But true. But I mean, see, that's the problem, relating. How do you relate that without knowing what it means? And I think reading reviews about stuff helped. It could be reviews about headphones. It could be anywhere. It could be on HiFi.org, whatever. But my point is reading what other people talk about and their verbiage, and then starting to relate. Like especially if you own like what they're talking about, you can relate to it.
Right.
If they review a headphone, you own it, and
that might make sense.
They use adjectives to describe it. Now, after you read enough of that over and over again, things overlap, and you start to get with the program.
I have been seeing that lately, where people are like, I have the same thing you have, but I want to hear what you have to say about it because I don't really know how to describe it myself.
Yeah, and that happens. That happens a lot. I mean, there's a lot of people, like I said, they probably won't get involved because they don't know the verbiage, so they can't type anything if you don't know what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people kind of lurk for like a year.
Yeah,
just kind of check things out, see what other people are saying. And they're like, all right, I've been here for a while, but I finally feel confident to actually know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and it was the same with us. I mean, back in the day when we started into the headphone scene and whatever the hell that was, 08 or whatever that was. I don't remember when we started getting more involved in it and started designing it. We all had to learn. The verbiage was actually young then. A lot of the two-channel verbiage, I would say some of it, a lot of it we translated into headphones because it didn't exist. I think a lot of it should translate into headphones because it's kind of like speakers.
Speakers on your head. Yeah.
So, I think all along over the last so many years or so, it's morphed into the headphone discussion, which is similar to speakers but different. Don't you think? Similar but different.
Well, it's basically the same concept, but the implementation is a little different. I think initially when I started reading these things, when I started seeing what people were saying about other products, I didn't really understand what they were talking about. took me a while before I really grasped what they were trying to convey. They would say these words. It was totally unclear what they meant by it, right? But I think what did it for me was simply experience, because I wasn't actively seeking at that time to understand what these people meant. I just assumed what they were saying was either not repeatable or too difficult to accurately convey, and the words were kind of arbitrary. And I think the word choices are arbitrary, but there does seem to be a pretty more or less unanimous approach to what words to use in the same situation.
Well, I think that comes from experience and reading what other people say.
Right.
You just learn the verbiage.
Yeah, but it does get to a point where if people just start saying things other people said, even though they have no experience with it.
Sometimes that happens. Right? So you got to be careful.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That can go the wrong way. But that usually self-corrects.
Yeah.
Usually you get the more experienced guys in there, and they change the verbiage up, and it self-corrects. But over time. But I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think I remember we did a video back in the day where I think it was might have been the first video I did there was a 4-part cable series I did where how I learned about designing cables. And I think it was the first video of it where I talked about the first time I really had to sit down and compare things was when I was trying to choose an op amp for a particular design, electronics design. And I wanted to hear differences between op amps. And I talked about making a switch box that, I could just toggle between sources, blah, blah, blah. But bottom line is that I remember what I was keying in on. And what I started to learn and trying to compare two things is I was looking for something to hear differences with in the music. And the first thing I remember hearing was a sibilant, like a vocal sibilant, like a female vocal I was listening to. I don't remember if it was Ricky Lee Jones, but there was a particular track that just happened to have a sibilance to the voice. And it struck me. And it's like, well, that's unique. Like I heard this, certain out of the voice. And we'll try to we'll try to add examples of this in the video so you can hear it too. But that sibilant I equated to more of a transient response, which is I was picking up on, like the initial like whatever, however the tongue and the mouth creates this, this certain impulse response, as I was keying in on. And then I went back and played that over and over and over. I mean, probably hundreds of times. And I started using that one spot on the track as among others, but I used that one spot on the track, and I started picking out differences in the op amp designs using that one place. And I think that's where it starts, is you hear something and then use it as an example, and then use that again, play back, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Through different speakers, headphones, whatever you're trying.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest thing is when you're first starting out, you're listening to like the whole track as a whole, like, trying to hear differences. But as you get more experience and stuff, you learn tracks that have a problem or not or whatever, and you're keying in on one thing.
There's certain parts of
and
each
you're just
track.
doing that without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Whereas new people are just trying to look at the whole song.
Right.
And that's way harder. You can't focus on one.
Yeah,
thing.
you build this mental library of things that stand out in the music.
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of guys do. I know when we do shows, we get a lot of people that come and bring their own music, some pre-record it, put it on a flash drive or something. They have 15, 20 tracks, whatever, and you could rapidly go through. I'll even do it if I did it. We had the same thing in our room. We used to have 15, 20 go-to tracks for headphones when we started doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could go through those tracks, I guess because I chose them. I go through tracks in a few minutes. Like someone could bring an amplifier and get here, tell me what this sounds like. And I go through those tracks in 5 minutes. I could completely describe what that amp is doing relative to what we were listening to prior, knowing, because I guess you're right, because I knew certain parts of every track, and I would just skim through to those parts.
Yeah, that's your baseline. You know them.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of having like a reference.
Right.
Because that's why people usually say it's like, well, I've never heard this track, and so they can't really tell the difference between stuff as much.
Right.
Because when you know the track and you've heard it 1,000 times.
Yeah, and all different types of systems too.
You could know what it sounds on different things.
Yeah.
So you could have a general idea.
You learn the range, the capable range of that track that you've listened to over and over again.
Like you heard it in a car, you heard it on cheap headphones, you heard it on high-end headphones, so you know. Yeah.
I mean, what instrument? Think of an instrument you would key in on some of those tracks.
Well, I think for me it's guitar.
Yeah.
But distorted guitar, and if you just listen just to the guitars, and you could hear like the definition of like the distortion and stuff in it, which sometimes it just sounds like, you know, just a note.
Yeah, just
But
flat.
then, yeah, as it gets better and better, it just sounds real gritty.
Yeah.
You know,
to a point where you can actually hear how bad the distortion might be.
Yeah.
Like you could hear better distortion versus good distortion.
Yeah. Well, you could tell like on older recordings
what they're using to create the distortion.
They're clearly using tube amps, and you can hear it's, you know, that's real guitar distortion sound, like
versus a solid state
breaking up tubes, or
a digital filter that they're putting it through or something. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I think triangles are something too I key in on, like, and we could cite an example here with triangle, but listening to the triangle, you know, you get the initial impact of the stick hitting the cymbal. I'm sorry, not triangle. I meant to say cymbals. You get the initial triangle works too.
Same thing.
Yeah. In fact, we've got triangle tracks that can maybe made to sound like a cowbell with certain tube amps, those big tubes that tend to resonate. We've heard triangles that could be turned into cowbells because the resonant character varies through the amp. But anyway, that's a different story altogether. But the initial, think about a cymbal hit where you've got a wooden stick initially hitting the cymbal. You've got that initial impact. That's something to listen to, right? How that carries through the cymbal, which you can hear on this, you know, example on here, on our video here, how it carries through the cymbal. You can hear the decay through the cymbal. And then how long that decay lasts through time. And all these things are changed depending on how good the system is. All three of those things, the initial impulse, the impact, you know, what that sounds like, and the sound of the cymbal itself as that impact carries through the metal of the cymbal, and then how long that goes out over time. And that's something you could compare to different gear, different headphones, whatever, and you'll find that it's actually quite different.
It is. Well, I think the easiest way to hear stuff like that is usually live recordings. It's like usually like big wide open spaces, so you got a lot of decay and stuff, so you can really hear the space of the room. And that's why some things sound bigger than other things, because they give you all those details into that stretch of space, you know.
Yeah, that's something we were keen on when we did the Atmos video a few videos back. We were talking about switching on Atmos, and on one of the tracks in particular, the sense of space got so much greater with the Atmos mix versus the stock mix. And obviously that's something they attempted to do in the studio, was let's give you more of the room versus not so much, you know, and take it as you wish.
I think I listen very differently than you do.
Probably.
I don't have like a memory or a database of particular spots and tracks, and I don't focus on that. I pay attention to the overall summary. I don't pay any attention to minor granularities in the track themselves so much. What I seem to pay more attention to is, I would say, rate of change in an absolute sense. So either bass impact, more or less typically the initial strike, if there's some sort of bass hit of sorts, and that seems to bring out some of the detail or differences between some of the gear, especially amplifiers. Some higher output impedance amplifiers have more trouble with this, especially with lower impedance, low sensitivity headphones. You'll hear the bass will get a little flabby or mushy, and you won't hear the acceleration of the driver effectively. It'll sound a little slow or sluggish.
Yeah, it's impact, bass impact.
But right, that seems
speed,
to be
sometimes we use the term speed.
Speed, sure.
It's a faster bass versus slower. Of course, technically, that doesn't make sense technically. Speed, right?
Well,
the woofer's always moving quickly, but it's supposed to be. But it really isn't. I mean, it
you
sounds
really could hear
slower
these things.
Right,
you really
it
could
sounds
hear it.
slower. Yeah.
A lot of times it's surprisingly audible, and impressively enough, in a lot of cases you actually could hear the resolution of the song easier from the bass than you can anything else.
Well, that's true.
Which is interesting. You wouldn't intrinsically that seems somewhat counterintuitive.
Yeah, you think the
the
highs
bass
would be,
would be the
cleaner, smoother, and they can be.
Yeah, same
Yeah.
can happen.
Right,
on
but
the
to
high.
me, it seems the bass is the first impact. And so usually I pay attention to that.
Well, we did that test a long time ago, years ago. I think we talked about it in an early video, where we were trying different recording in different resolutions from 44.1 to 192.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did 4 steps. And then we were recording off an existing CD, analog out, in and turning it into a digital file. So it was the same original CD. I forgot what it was, but it was one of the CDs we enjoyed. We knew the CD, playing it well. Came analog out into a AD converter, and basically recorded it digitally in 4 resolutions. And we wanted to step through the resolutions of the same recording and find out at what point could we hear or not hear a difference in res, and how. And it turned out, and this was on a 2-channel system. This was with speakers. This was before we were making headphones, in a room, a 2-channel room. So rooms themselves muck with the bass, so that's always an issue to begin with. And we had a fairly well-treated room.
It was a pretty big room.
Yeah, it was a big room, so we didn't have too much problems with that. And the speakers were a little underdamped. They were a bit boomier. They were parafocals we had at the time in the room, so they weren't the greatest for this. But bottom line is that I remember that the bass region was the thing you had to key in on to easily pick out the difference in resolution.
Yeah, on first glance, they all pretty much sounded the same.
Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
It was getting hard until you figured it out, that it was the bottom end.
Yeah.
And it was that impact you talked about where you started realizing it just sounded more faster, and particularly because the speakers were underdamped or slower to begin with. Any improvement on that would be beneficial, and and I mean, I remember 44 to 96 kilohertz was the biggest jump.
Right.
And into 192 was like not as much, but it was always in the bass. And it's funny because at first you think, I'm listening for highs or better high frequency information because of the resolution. But
Yeah, that's there, but I find it to be much more subtle.
yeah,
I think that's hard to notice. And in some tracks, I can't tell the difference reliably. In some tracks, you would think the high end would be smoother or a little bit closer to lifelike, but with certain things, you can't tell. It's trivial.
and I think that's where it comes in.
Where it comes in.
That's where it comes in. Like me and Jason have, we definitely listen to music a lot more than you do, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that we take it to the next level, because we can take it from that can't hear a difference to we know particular spots in certain tracks where we can hear differences, and we've learned that.
Yeah, but again, if you look at the whole picture, it's still hard.
Right.
It's just because you're used to keying on one specific aspect
Yeah.
that you can do
See,
it.
I think that's a little misleading, though. If you know a particular spot where this particular codec or format falls apart, and then it helps you to discern the difference, if you need to focus on that point, I would say that there's really not much of a difference in it anyways. And you wouldn't reliably be able to discern it from one to another.
You could, but for like people like us, it annoys us when those differences get.
Well, that's the thing. You get
Yeah,
so used to
maybe.
doing the same test on so much stuff that it's like, I have to get this perfect.
And it becomes almost second nature. It's just kind of like, it actually becomes part of the whole picture, the whole track, where now, it's kind of like once you hear the mistake in a system, now you're hearing it on everything, on all their tracks, and it just magnifies it because you're aware of it versus you throw something in like a better amp or a better pair of headphones, and that problem goes away. It's not covered off or disappears. It's just, the for whatever reason, again, the cymbal decay is proper, or the guitar, to him, the guitar distortion sounds, a certain way that because he plays guitar through an amplifier, so he knows what it sounds like sitting in front of it. So you can tell on the recording where it's hitting where you want or not, That helps too, I guess.
Well, yeah.
The fact that you're actually, you can create your own jams and A-B.
I think I worked effectively backwards from your approach, because I never needed to hear a difference between something.
Well, that's
right?
true.
I always relied on someone else to do that for me, to ensure that I'm mitigating any internal biases from that.
That's true. You would if you didn't have the need. Yeah.
It became surprisingly obvious to me, and I think this is something that newcomers may be unaware of. You see these people talking about these words to describe music or sounds or their system, and at first it just seems so baffling. It seems so implausible that you could hear these differences, and sometimes people probably are fooling themselves, but a lot of the times they're not. So many of these differences that people could reliably or apparently reliably discern, and you could spend all day trying to A/B and you can't hear it. It's shocking to me because now I could hear these so easily, and it's just from experience, just from having done it and having sufficient time to compare things over and over.
It does take a long time.
Over, at this point now, like a decade.
Yeah.
At some point, you figure it out. You realize, oh, that's what they're talking about when they say this word. And it becomes pretty obvious. And with enough experience, when you hear the absolute truths, when you hear how far things could go, I find it to be pretty easy to reliably discern most of these differences people talk about. Some things are a bit more subtle, but so many things are just really obvious if you actually have the experience. But how do you convey that to a new listener?
Yeah, get more experience.
Right. It's always about the experience. That's
there ain't
huge.
There's not really a shortcut for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the more listening, the more experience, the more you learn. That kind of goes for anything, though, when you think about it.
Well, yeah.
You look at anything. Like, look at Tiger Woods. When did he start playing golf? When he was 4 or 5?
Right. Well, how do you tell someone how to golf good in 5 minutes?
Yeah, you can't. Not possible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like kind of like when you first start cooking. You're not a chef, right? You're not even close.
Yeah, you have no idea even how. Okay, you throw some salt in there, good enough. You have no idea what the variations in that can be. Where all of a sudden you've got a choice of salt, how much to put it in, when to put it in the recipe.
Yeah, there's so many variables.
Crazy.
Yeah. Depends how deep you want to go, but audio's the same way.
Yep, it's the same thing. It's all about taste at some point, and that's really it. It's a refinement in tastes. You're refining your taste.
Yeah,
it's
your
like
own taste.
Anything else. Yeah.
Which I guess that's all that matters.
It's a personal journey.
Yep.
It's like people equate it to wine usually. Beer drinkers can equate to beer, things like that, where you try all different kinds of beers and you start to realize what you really do like and don't like.
You got to try a lot before you actually know.
Yeah. And you wind up full circle sooner or later. You come back around and go, oh, this might not be so bad after all. But sometimes you never come, but you go back and go, oh, that's like,
Oftentimes after you get a bit of experience.
Yeah.
When you come back around, you come to realize things were totally different than how you saw them.
Yeah. Some of the foods I ate when I was like your guys' age or even earlier than you when I was in my teens, I wouldn't even touch nowadays, It just wouldn't do it.
TV dinners?
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, some of them are good. There are some good. Trader Joe's has got some pretty good Indian dinners.
Yeah, they're not bad.
But, they're not so bad. But, yeah, beyond that, though, your typical frozen dinner thing is like...
Banquet?
So I'm not sure how particularly insightful this video is if we're telling people, how do you listen? You get a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Well, you got to start sometime.
Start
now.
Yeah, start now, yeah. And again, look at the examples we cited here in the video and just start keying it. Find something that you key in on it. You hear, all of a sudden you're here like, I never heard that before. And then, try that track or that position, that second of that track every time you put something different in the system. And you start to learn it. And again, you'll start to do that with multiple tracks. You'll gain a library of...
And try it on different stuff.
Absolutely.
It's got to be different stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, see how every different headphone reacts to that one spot on a track.
Sometimes there's very little, if any, difference. Other times it's huge. Right? I think you need to hear a few of those pretty significant differences. And from hearing how this same track could sound different, at least for me, I think you could use this information to more easily hear these differences on future bits of kit, future amps and headphones and whatnot.
And learn what your preferences are and ultimately grow a great system. Put together a great system because now you know what you're listening for.
Yeah, hopefully.
Oh, yeah. Great system for you.
For you. Yeah. Personally. That's what it's all about.
That is the reality, though. Yeah. A great system for someone else may be a very good system for you, but it may not be the best.
Yeah.
So figuring out what you want, what you're looking for.
So like us, work at it and you'll get there. And on that note, we need to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. Take care of yourselves. Thumbs us up.